Welcome to the Derek Loudermilk Show. This is episode 351 with Lucy Pringle. My guest today, Lucy Pringle, is one of the world's leading researchers on crop circles. She's been studying them and photographing them for the last 30 years. She's written several books on the topic, including her most recent one, The Energies of Crop Circles, The Science and Power of a Mysterious Intelligence, which is a really great book because it compiles all the data and research that she has conducted herself and with many different research teams over these years. So we're going to hear about her research, and it is just mind-blowing. She focuses on what people experience when they are in a crop circle, when they're interacting with crop circles. And there's dramatic stories. She has the largest database, over 800 stories from people who have had medical healing experiences in the crop circle. But sometimes it's not healing. Sometimes it's the opposite. Sometimes it makes people nauseous or some other yucky feeling. And you won't know for sure what you'll experience until you actually walk inside of one. She shares some of her research in this interview about what happens with the brain when somebody walks before and after, they go into a crop circle, what's happening in the brain. And she's very excited about the implications for people with Parkinson's. Crop circles seem to stop symptoms of Parkinson, which is amazing. And if we could find out the mechanism, then there's some real people that could be helped with this information. And we'll also talk a bit about how crop circles form. Is it pranksters? Is it UFOs? What's going on? And part of the leading theory that she talks about in her book includes several different forces from the ionosphere, forces from under the ground, from the water that's under the ground, and also the electromagnetic telluric lines that crisscross the surface of the Earth and the intersection of these lines, these nodes. So it's a great privilege to have Lucy on the show and hear all of her amazing and wonderful stories from 30 years researching crop circles. Here she is. Lucy Pringle, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be on your show.
Yes, and what's it like? I've never been in a crop circle. What's it like walking into a crop circle? Maybe we could start there.
Well, I think to start with is the anticipation. People have all different sorts of ideas in their head when they're going to visit a crop circle. I think it's primarily a feeling of excitement because they don't know what's going to happen, how they're going to react, and dependent on how new or familiar they are with the phenomenon. If people have read quite a lot about it, then they may have preconceived ideas about it, dependent on their experiences or having read about experiences of other people. And people who are new to it, well, they're full of excitement, but they just don't know what to expect. They think it's going to be wonderful, and indeed it may be wonderful, but it also at times it produces effects which are not quite so pleasant.
Have you experienced both ways?
Oh, I think I've experienced every single type of thing that you can feel, from nausea, headaches, curing, healing, and I've been through the whole gambit of experiences and loss of memory, seeing strange things, seeing things double, seeing beautiful lights, I can't tell you. In my book, you probably, if you've read it, you would realize how many various things are that you can experience inside a crop circle. I mean, it's quite amazing. And people, totally unexpected things happen to people. Wonderful, wonderful, but a lot of the cures, I have to stress, are temporary.
While you're in the crop circle.
Yeah, you get this wonderful feeling of well-being after you've been in the crop circle, very intensely, and this may last up to 6 weeks. And it's a really joyous feeling. It's something that people have never experienced before. And there was one, I think she was almost 90 who came, because I take tours. And on one tour she got up early in the morning, but she was almost 90, and she didn't know if she could last the day. And one of the circles into which we went after lunch, in order to get to it, it was a huge, huge field. But in order to get around it, we had to walk out around the perimeter. And that was about 3/4 of a mile. She did it. And then not only that, but she went into the stone, because one of the tours, there's an optional extra of visiting Stonehenge, having a private entry visit, which is just fantastic. And you get the energy bouncing off the stones, because you're allowed to go right up. You don't touch them, but you can go right up to the stones, but that's a private entry. So that was quite late in the evening. And she was just extraordinary. And she wrote to me the next day saying she felt absolutely wonderful. She didn't think she was going to manage it at all. And yet she said she felt as fresh as a daisy. Quite extraordinary. You never know. Yeah. You never know how people are going to react. But I'm always on hand in case they don't feel well. And again, I've had many cases where people haven't felt well. And then I always say, well, go out right away. And there was one at Albourne, again in Wiltshire. And I went in, and I didn't particularly like it, I have to tell you, when I went in. But everybody else seemed to be all right. And so very often I'll douse for them, or if they can douse themselves, that is finding the right place for them to sit, and they want to meditate or examine the circle, or whatever they want to do. See that they're all right. And as I didn't feel well, I came out, and there was one girl standing outside, and I said, "Are you part of my tour?" And she said, "Yes." And I said, "Well, why aren't you in the circle?" And she said, "I put one foot in and I had to come out." So I thought, well, gosh, that's interesting, because I didn't feel as bad as she did, but I did feel bad. But you see, there again, you're getting conflicting experiences, aren't you? You're getting the ones who were perfectly happy to go in and sit and meditate. And this girl who had a violent reaction of disease, and I who didn't like it either.
Interesting. What was there anything in common between you and this woman that made you guys have that reaction?
Not superficially, I couldn't tell you, but it's not as though we could go through each other's history in depth. Not that I know of.
And did I hear you say that there's different spots within a crop circle that people would prefer?
Oh, yes. Oh, very much so, because they are all on... we've got to talk about earth energies and ley lines. Okay. Now, what seems to happen is that there's this... the force is electric, but there seems to be a magnetic connection between the earth energy lines, and they crisscross all over our planet. Yes. And they're electric lines or telluric lines, which run through the ground and run under the sea. And they seem to attract crop circles on what we call, it's the crossover points, the nodal points. And what was your question?
I was interested in, how people pick a spot within a crop circle.
I see. Right. So they're in the circle, and there'll be all sorts of different energies within the circle. And some people will find particular energy points that they like within the circle. Other times we'll sit as a group inside. So it depends how sensitive people are, Derek. You know, some people are very, very sensitive and they find their spot themselves. Other times, if they can't, I'll take round my pendulum and I'll put my hand on their shoulder and I'll walk around with them until I find their spot. And yes. And then they sit and, you see, this summer we had a most wonderful crop circle just outside Avebury. And I'm sure most of your guests will be familiar with Avebury. It is the largest stone complex in the world, and it's the only one which is inhabited, still inhabited. And it is absolutely full of energy lines. The whole area, it's an area which is looked after by UNESCO, but you've got Avebury Complex, you've got Windmill Hill, you've got West Kennet Long Barrow, you've got Overton Hill, you've got East Kennet Long Barrow. It's an area which is pulsating with energy. And personally, I couldn't live there. I mean, it's too energetic. It would completely drain me. I mean, I love going there, but on a temporary basis. But there was this one at Avebury this year, which sadly we can't see, which had the most. It was a spiral inside, and it had the finest little lines all going in between the spirals, little linear lines. It was absolutely amazing. And I took 2 tours in there, and in the first one, I had to dig them out to go to lunch after they'd been there an hour and a half. And they thought they'd been in there 10 minutes.
Oh, interesting.
And then the next tour, which was just a few days later, blew me down, but they stayed in there for 2.5 hours, and I was desperate to get them out. Eventually, I did encourage them all to leave, and again, they thought they were in there for 10 minutes. So what happens to the time?
Did you know that time had passed, but they didn't?
No, because I'm in charge. I've got to keep my eye on my watch.
Yeah.
I can't allow myself to float away. I've got to really, keep thinking. And it has many strange. They were so happy and peaceful. And there was one little boy who is terrifically active. I think he's about 10 or 11. And he went flat out, fast asleep. And his mother said, I don't know what's happened to him. He's never done that before. And she's going to write me a report because he had many strange experiences when he was asleep. Children react extraordinarily. They're very sensitive, extraordinarily strongly. And yes, I mean, you couldn't wake him if you tried.
Wow. That sounds so incredible. And I was making a connection between in the Carlos Castaneda books, the very beginning, the first one I think that was written, the apprentice goes to meet the shaman in Mexico or wherever he is, and the first thing he's supposed to do, the apprentice, is supposed to find his spot on the front porch.
Oh, really?
That's meant for him. And there's also a lot of spots that are not good for him. But he spends a day and a half, like, first he's trying to, think his way through it. And then he's trying to squint his eyes. And then, he does all these different things. And eventually he just falls asleep. And he passes the test because he's fallen asleep in the right spot. But it's interesting to think of particular spots for particular people.
Oh, yes, very much so. It's very much because we've got our own identity, you see, and we've got our own auras. We've got our own electric aura all around us, and everybody else has their own electric aura around them. And my younger son, when he was very, very young, he saw everybody's colors, and he used to call them colors. And my elder son, who was very hyperactive, Angus, the younger son, who was psychic, he said to me one day, "Oh, Mama, Slater's got two colours around him." And I thought to myself, how lucky. I couldn't see it. But anyhow, I said to Angus, "I don't think you can have two colours around you." And I went upstairs and I thought, how silly of me. I must go and check this. And I found a little book, and at the end it said double auras. So I went down and I said to Angus, "I'm so sorry. You can see these things and I can't." And he was very lucky. He could see our black and white television in colour.
Amazing.
Extraordinary. And this wore off when he got to puberty. Puberty. Yeah.
I have two young children right now, 2 and 4, and I haven't talked about this much, but my daughter, she can predict exactly where lightning will strike. That's one of her cool powers.
Wow.
She'll say,
that's interesting.
Lightning's going to be over there, and then it'll just come a second later.
Really? Well, she's connecting. You see, these are both very strong electric forces, aren't they? Somehow her electric aura is connecting with the electric force. Does she feel anything? I mean, does she feel headachy or?
I'm not sure. She's doesn't have much language yet. She's only 2. So.
She's how old?
2.
Oh. No.
So speaking of electricity and magnetism, I believe that's part of how you think that they're formed. Could you talk a little bit about how they're made?
Well, I'm going to look at my book. You know, it's really interesting because we have a program over here in England called Mastermind. And there's a black chair, and everybody dreads the black chair when they have to sit in it and face the question master. And there was a man called Magnus Magnusson, who actually used to run it at times, and then he retired. He was an Icelander, and he wrote many, many books. And he was asked to be a guest. And the subject he chose was one of his books. Well, they fired various questions at him, and he could answer very few. And I said to myself, I don't think Magnus wrote that book.
Mm.
And it wasn't until I started writing, because I've now written 4 books, that I realized you cannot possibly remember everything you've written.
Yes.
Because you do such a huge amount of research. And so now I'm going to try and tell you what I possibly can about how they're formed. And so you'll have to hold on a minute, because I can't get this off absolutely pat. It was an extraordinary event, because I was giving a lecture in Hampshire at Alton College. And after the event, a woman took a taxi and happened to say to the taxi driver, she'd just been to a really fascinating talk on crop circles. The taxi driver said, "Oh, I saw one appear." Wait a second, have I got the right thing? I saw one appear at Stonehenge. Well, I then made inquiries. I didn't think there was one at Stonehenge in that particular year. And she came, I got in touch with her, and she said, "Oh, goodness me," she said, "no, that was ages ago." And I said, "Well, at that particular, when we were at that time," I said, "there'd been one in 1996, one in 97, one in 2001. And she said it was 1997. She immediately said that. Her son, who was in the army, she was going down to visit him. He had some leave. And as she drove down from Amesbury, which is just above the road above Stonehenge, you drive down the hill, you see Stonehenge, and actually it looks quite small in the distance. When you're flying, it's even more difficult to find it. Yet when you're in there, they're huge, great megaliths. Anyhow, she was fascinated by a cloud which was hovering over the field just opposite Stonehenge. And when she got further, closer to this, she saw there were a whole lot of cars pulled up against the fence opposite Stonehenge, and one just happened to nip out, and so she pulled in. And wait a second, let me just see. Yes, wait a second. So I questioned her about various things, and she told me that in some way, she said the most amazing thing was that she saw the crop going down in front of her eyes.
Yeah, wow.
And she said, that is wow. That really is wow. But she couldn't see any shape because she was on the same level. And I said, well, was there any connection between the cloud and the crop circle? And
Right.
she did, yes. There was some extraordinary connection between the two, because as the crop going down in the field it seemed to be enlarging, so the cloud above was also enlarging and rotating and spinning, very, very similar to what was happening in the crop circle. So I said, well, how long was all this taking? And she said, she was Irish and very blunt. She said, when you're saying something like this happened, Lucy, you're not looking at your watch. So I felt rightly rebuked and said, no, I don't suppose so. And then, but I thought, well, I'll try again. So I said, well, can you just sort of think a little bit back? And she said, Lucy, I was there. I know what I saw. You weren't there. You don't know what I saw. But she said, I think about 20 to 25 minutes. So armed with that, I can't tell you how disappointed I was, because all the other reports I'd had, and writing my first book, Crop Circle Enigma, I'd had many, many reports in the early 1900s, so this goes back a long time, of children seeing these things in the field. And often they were associated with bad times and the war. They were looked upon with quite a lot of superstition.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, wait a second, how long? I then, on the way back, I got in touch with Jim Lyons, with whom he's part of the co-author of this book.
Yes.
And I said to Jim, and he was far more interested in the cloud, because he said that fits part of his hypothesis. Now, wait a second. Now, here we are. As a result of work conducted in the 1990s, it's possible to calculate the time a formation takes to appear based on the size and number of circles. The method relates to the Earth's gravitational and magnetic fields. This predicts a velocity of the resulting vortex filament of some 10 foot per second. Now, that's very interesting. In the old days, we used to have teams of people going out into the field and measuring up. And I've got little booklets of that, I think going up until 1997. So up until then, we could work out exactly, using this method, how long all these formations took to appear. The filament propagates not unlike a solar flare, repeatedly looping through the Earth's surface, embroidering a gradually evolving pattern. To create the 151 in the 905.2 by 508 foot pattern would take the order of 20 to 25 minutes. You see, she was spot on. And she said the descending force emits an electrical discharge which releases bubbles from the underground aquifer, which rise up through the surface of the ground, and patterns are formed. Wait a second. Yes. And so it would all fit in exactly with what was happening. There's less pressure inside than, yes, the descending force, yes. developed like embroidery. There's significantly less pressure inside than outside. Therefore, it's a sort of sucking down motion from the inside, which bends or sucks down the crop at the base. It was quite interesting because I challenged him on this. He also said, the mist, we were talking about the mist.
So this, just to be clear for the listener, this is your co-author's working model that he's proposing. This is James Lyons.
What you're talking about the time. Well, we're talking about the time element, but also one's got to realize that this is an electric force. So it comes down and it penetrates the Earth's magnetic field, and then it creates this force. It creates the Earth energy, electrical lines all over the Earth. And as I was explaining, you get the crossover points, and which are called the nodal points. And it's as though there's some sort of magnetic attraction of this force. And we don't know exactly what this force is, except that it's electrical. And it's attracted to the nodal, the electrical energy in the nodal points. And you have all the underground aquifers, which are all part of it. It's as above and so below. There's an awful lot we don't know, Derek. You know, we may sound as though we're getting to grips with it scientifically and all the rest, but it's quite beyond some of our modern science. And in fact, when I challenged Jim about, this was his pattern, so to speak, his template, and he said, well, there are certain things that, in the more complicated ones, certain things that happen on a sphere, and it's beyond our common understanding and understanding of science today. So we have to realize that, in fact, we know a lot, but we probably know less than we think we know.
Yes, I've experienced the same as a scientist. You read a lot, you learn a lot, and you think you've got it, and then you realize you're still beginning.
Absolutely. But you see, this is the exciting part. I think with the new science of today, people have a much more open mind. The old-time scientists who are being proved, some of them, their patterns and their ideas were absolutely sound and solid, but quite a lot of them are being discredited now, and science is moving on. But in the old days, I'm working much more with scientists who have been retired. Because when you're still working, you have to adapt to a certain scientific model, if you like. And you're frightened of losing your job prospect. You're frightened of being ridiculed by your peers. In fact, there's a model you do adhere to. Not that I'm decrying science in any way. It's absolutely essential to our progress. And I'm a huge admirer of science, but you've got to be open-minded. And think outside the box.
Yeah, I wanted to. So I've got your book right here. I'm just going to put it up on the screen for people that are watching.
Yes, if anybody wants to buy that, they can go onto my website and they can buy it. It's maybe slightly more expensive than if you go to Amazon, but at least you'll get a signed copy.
Oh, excellent. Yeah. Oh, well, whoever wants to do that, I encourage it. I wanted to ask you about the title. The subtitle is The Science and Power of a Mysterious Intelligence. Could you talk about the mysterious intelligence part of the title that you're referring to?
Well, I think it's because there are a lot of things that happen we can't explain. I've just been giving you an example of one scientifically, but many of the people who react, I mean, there was one extraordinary, you don't have to actually be inside a crop circle, you can be affected by pictures, by photographs, because the energy that is coming off the photographs has the same effect, maybe not quite as much, but as if you're actually inside the circle. And to give you one example, there was a lovely girl called Paddy Lyons. And in the old days, she is still fascinated in the subject, but she used to go into the fields and go into the circles. She used to fly over them. And little by little, she started to develop arthritis. I'm not certain whether it's rheumatoid or osteoporosis. I'm not certain, but anyhow, she gradually became worse and worse until she was ultimately crippled in a wheelchair. And up until COVID, I used to give my annual talk of what had happened in that particular year, the end of the season in Petersfield. And she persuaded her daughter, she was living in London, to bring her up from London, and I booked a room for disabled people and everything, and I put her right in front of so that she was right close to the stage and her wheelchair could fit in, etc. And at the end, quite a lot of people came to talk to me, and we were chatting away, and suddenly there was Paddy Lyons. Where was her wheelchair? Wasn't anywhere. Her daughter was dancing around rather like a dervish, thinking her mother was going to fall over. And I was so amazed at it, I actually didn't know what to say. So I just said to her, "How is the pain?" And she said, "It's 99% gone." And then we chatted, and I still couldn't believe what I was seeing. And then she walked away, and she walked away striding evenly, back straight, just like any ordinary person who wasn't disabled in any way whatsoever. And then she got it. I mean, it was a big room, huge, way she had to walk from where it came in the door and up to the stage, and then back again. And when she came out, she just got into a wheelchair again. Sadly, it all came back. But she maintained a sense of well-being for weeks and weeks and weeks afterwards. And when I chatted to her about it, it's actually written in that book because it was such an astounding thing. And she said she doesn't remember a word of what I said. Not a word. But it was the energies coming off the pictures that had this effect. So, I mean, what can be more mysterious than that?
Wow. Maybe doctors should just prescribe your book to people. Doctors should just be prescribing your book to people.
Doctors? Oh, doctors. Oh, they, I think, would treat, they're very close-minded. Occasionally I come across one who says that's really, really fascinating. And I'm working with an advanced clinical physiologist from Devon and Exeter Hospital who's very interested in neurology. And we've been working on many, many things. And particularly at the moment, I'm working on the temporary relief of Parkinson's. When Parkinson's sufferers go into a genuine crop circle, they will stop shaking. Now, the first instance I had of this, first example, was in 1997. Again, 1997 was an amazing year. And a friend of mine had been badgering me. She had Parkinson's, to go into a crop circle. And I said, "No, I'm awfully sorry, Mary, I can't take you in because you're not well. And I know that not everybody feels well, and I can't be responsible for you." Anyhow, I'd known her for so long, and she badgered me to such an extent that I said, "All right, listen, I'll give in. And if I find one next year, which is really, really totally beneficial, or as beneficial as I can possibly guarantee, I'll let you know." And this one appeared at Alton Friars in 1997. We called it the Taurus Knot. And I went in, I drove all the way down from Hampshire to Wiltshire every day for a week. And I went into the circle, I felt absolutely fine. I chatted to people, and I stood at the end of the field and took reports from people. And there wasn't a single one who'd felt unwell. So I said to Mary, listen, I said, if you're still determined, this is the one I recommend. But I'm still not going to be responsible. And so she went in with a friend, and they sat in the centre for about 20 minutes. And she stopped shaking for 24 hours. Now, that doesn't happen. It simply doesn't happen. You know, you're shaking so many times per second. And, you know, it might be for 24 hours. So that alerted me to the fact that something was happening. And little by little, I tried various means. We've tried all sorts of means. And we've tried they're always, now that we're so advanced technology-wise, we can have these programs on our computers with electrodes on their heads, and we put different stimuli, etc. And we can see what's happening to their brains. Mm-hmm. We do control tests beforehand in a room at a study center or somewhere. Then we select a circle, repeat the tests, come out of the circle and do another control test. So what you really have is 2 control tests, but in fact 3 identical tests.
Yes.
So that you can then look at them, compare them, and then you can try and analyze what has happened. And it's extraordinary how the brain changes in so many. And this again is unexplainable. I've now got, I've been collecting data of how people react when they're in the circles. And I've got over 800 reports. I long to get up to 1,000 of how they felt, not just inside the circles, but in the vicinity of circles and remotely.
Yeah.
But it's really very, very exciting work, you know, Derek, and it's frustrating as well, because when you see these happening, and you see it actually on the graphs on the computer, in no way can they be dismissed. What is it inside the circle that is creating these effects?
Yeah, I can imagine.
We don't know. And if we did, we'd have the answer to Parkinson. I think maybe it sounds in a ridiculous way, but you know, just like Newton and the apple falling off the tree and gravity and all that, that seemed quite ridiculous at the time, that you get this very important theory of an apple falling off the tree. Why shouldn't the same thing happen in crop circles? Why shouldn't something be revealed in crop circles which would give us an understanding of what was happening to Parkinson's? And I long for more support. We're doing very, very serious work on this. And Parkinson's, it's a most debilitating condition.
Yeah,
I know a lot of work is being done on it because of it. It's so debilitating, and it's experienced by so many people. My interest in it really started, well, with Mary Davies, but I had a cousin who was my favorite cousin. He was a scientist. He couldn't understand what was happening to his brain. And he eventually, well, he got Parkinson's and eventually died. And I was so fond of him. He acted as a stimulus, really, I suppose, to my work, and a continued stimulus, because he was a mega scientist. And he was, you know, the drugs they tried out on him and didn't have an effect, or didn't have this, that, and the next thing. So yes, that is my radon death for being in this, working on this phenomenon. I mean, I love it and I love flying, but again, that cost me a huge amount of money to do it. and I try and raise money by doing my writing and my calendars and all that sort of thing, try and raise the funds. But you have to have a reason for doing it. And I think this is why so many people who have been in and out of this subject, they've been fascinated, they couldn't understand it, it was a mystery. And then because they haven't got a reason for being in the subject, they leave it.
Yeah, that makes
go
sense.
Away. So you have to have this reason, a reason.
Yeah, wow, very powerful. Thank you for sharing. I'd like to tell you how I first noticed crop circles, just to see your thoughts, because it sounds similar to this woman in the wheelchair at your talk.
Yes.
For weeks, every night I had, all my dreams were just crop circle dreams all night long. And I had never really looked into crop circles before. And so I started just looking at, Googling pictures of crop circles, and I discovered there was quite a lot of crop circle. I had no idea. But it also sort of often UFOs and extraterrestrial intelligence and mysterious intelligence, like in your book title, they seem to be linked. And so it sort of introduced me to both crop circles and the UFO phenomenon at the same time. But it was really wild having that just persistent crop circle dream time.
I'm hammering at you.
Yeah. And I was living in Portugal at the time. I don't know if there's many crop circles there.
Not a lot.
Not a lot. And my understanding is they're all over the world, but the majority are in the UK. Is that right?
They're a majority in UK because we're so full of sacred sites. But I think we've either got 65 or 68 countries where they appear.
Mm-hmm. And I know there are artists or hoaxers that have been able to create similar artworks. Have you ever encountered a circle where you couldn't tell if it was the real thing or if it was an artist's, a human artist making it?
Well, that's a very good question. It's been easier this year in a way because we haven't had so many tourists from abroad, and quite a lot of the English have now got quite bored with the subject because they want an answer, and goodness knows we'll never get the answer. Will it be finite or infinite? We don't know this phenomenon. Anyhow, you have got to be either the first or one of the very first people in to the circle, because there are many ways of determining whether one is genuine or is hoaxed. And it all depends on the state of the crop, whether it's green crop or whether it's ripened crop. And you have to look for many, many different things. The answer is, to my knowledge, I've never been fooled. But there was a program with the BBC, and I may be quite wrong, or maybe very presumptuous saying that. When there are a lot of tourists, all the evidence is ruined and you can't go in. But there was one program I was doing for the BBC many years ago, and they said they wanted to test me on a circle. So I went up to a place called Teagley's Down, which wasn't far from where I lived in Hampshire. And there was a lovely circle there. It was in ripened crop, green in the ripe crop, wheat. And I went in there and I felt very, very carefully the stalk between my finger and my thumb. And I found that even though it didn't look crushed, it was crushed. And then I looked underneath the crop and there were seeds on the ground. Mm. So I said to the producers, all I can tell you is that this is one which has been made by man, or else a lot of people has been in it, because you've got crushed wheat and you've got seeds, which obviously some weight has been applied to the crop in order to dislodge the seeds. And actually, the next year, it's lovely because you get it coming up in a sort of negative, because the seeds then regenerate. So you get the circle, but it's in the negative instead of the positive. So, no, they didn't get me. But I could have easily been fooled. A friend of mine has been fooled on the BBC, and I thought, wow, you better watch out. And so, yes, the answer is, if you are the first person in, you know what to look for. Yes, you can. I think you can tell. I hope I'm right in saying that.
I was assuming that you just wouldn't feel anything in a man-made one, and you would feel.
Oh, things. No. You've got to have physical evidence. And it's a very strange thing, David. When you're looking for physical evidence, your mind is on a completely different level. When you're just walking in and letting your mind float away, you can then take on the energy of the circle. But when you're doing what I call strictly scientific work, you are not in that frame of mind at all.
Gotcha. I think there was a picture in your book of perhaps a bird that got intermixed with the crops as they were being formed in one of the crop circles.
Oh, yes, that was rather strange. Animals are affected, but this one was, yes, it was this was in Surrey, again, not too far from where I lived, and a friend of mine, a researcher called Christopher Weeks, with whom I've worked for years and years and years. This must be almost 20 years ago. He rang through one evening to say he'd found a circle in a field close to where he lived. And I said, well, I think it's a bit too late to come tonight. But I said, listen, I'll come over straight away tomorrow. And he said, there's something very strange about this circle. He said, there's sort of little bits of flesh around. And she said, very strange. So I thought, oh. And so we went and we examined it very closely, and we could see little tiny bits of flesh on the surface. And then we looked underneath, and there was, in just one particular part, there were evidence of blood and flesh underneath. It was a double ringer, which means that there were two rings. On the outer ring, there'd been a kill of a pigeon, and it was quite obvious. There was feathers and there were bones and all that sort of thing. Okay. But this was completely disintegrated, whatever it was. So Christopher took examples of it and sent it down to a biochemist down in Cornwall, I think it was. And the report came back to say that they thought it had been a bird which had been completely exploded.
Oh, goodness.
And so this intrigued me no end. So I kept on going into that field. And then one time, what did I find but empty cartridges? Now, this told me exactly what had happened, because the scientist went on to say that he thought the bird was dead when it exploded. So I believe what had happened, there were people out pigeon shooting,
okay,
probably quite legally. They'd shot this pigeon and they hadn't found it. So it was lying in the field, and it just happened to lie in the exact spot where the crop circle appeared. And it just demonstrates the force for it to have completely exploded this dead bird. So I would, people want to go and experience it when this force happens. I don't want to be anywhere near. I can jolly well tell you. And there were a couple called, I'm not going to reveal their name because they were very worried that they'd get publicity. And one formed around them.
Oh my.
And the girl was totally buffeted. And completely buffeted, and she had terrible earache afterward, and she went to a doctor, and both her eardrums had been perforated. And that was a minor event. And the man had, I wrote it up in my first book, the man had, all I will tell you, and you will have to work it out for yourself, an uplifting experience which lasted for 48 hours.
The other person had a
The
good
man
experience. Okay.
had an uplifting experience which lasted for 48 hours, and you would have to work that out yourself.
Huh. How about that?
Well, I can tell you that when quite a lot of men went into the crop circles after that.
Let's talk about are there messages and or themes per crop circle season? Is there any communication? Is it a form of communication? Could you talk about any messages in the circles?
I think that's very individual, how people interpret them. That's a very, very personal, individual thing. Some are very obvious. You got the hummingbird one. Well, the hummingbird that relates to the many, many, many different customs. One of the people of South America, it's their symbol, and they relate the hummingbird to reincarnation, because they think they die during the night and they come to light in the life in the morning. So they think they're a symbol of reincarnation. There are many, many wonderful, when you go into the ancient customs of different countries, I mean, this is a subject, Eric, which takes you everywhere. Geography, science, every type of science, music, because music and number are related, mathematics, art, customs of other countries, any subject, religions, a lot of Kabbalistic connections. All I can tell you is that I've learned more in the last 30 years, well, not 30 years, but all the time that I've been in it.
Yeah.
Because you're just, one subject is appearing after the next. And I thought, I've got to look that up. I've got to research that. I've got to learn a bit more about that.
I was looking at some of the photos from this year, and it seems like I was trying to see if there was a pattern or something. It seems like maybe a lot of triangle, star type of patterns this year. Do you think is there like
is there a theme?
Is there a theme, like a TV season?
Well, there was the theme when the hummingbird came, because there was a fish. I think there was a fish, and yes, it was a sort of where you had a lot of natural, all sorts of natural creatures, earth and sea appeared. Very naturally, yes. That was a strange year, but actually the one, the hummingbird, this had a story to it. A young man had a very bad skiing accident, and he hadn't broken his neck, but he'd done pretty bad damage to it. And over the years, despite all the work, physio and everything, it gradually got worse and worse and worse. And then he grew up, and he got to a stage in life when he could only sleep on one side of his head, and he had to have a special pillow and everything. And he and his wife came down to Wiltshire one year, and they had a caravan, and they parked up at the top of Overton Hill. And he went into many of these formations, and he was in the hummingbird one, and he suddenly noticed, to his absolute astonishment, that all the pain after all these years of suffering had completely disappeared. And again, you have to say, how? Here's all I can think of is that there has to be some sort of connection between your electrical energy and the one that you're finding in the crop circles, which is partly the crop circle and partly the earth energy. you seem to be dealing with, it's what I call, it's rather like a Christmas pudding mixture.
Okay.
You've got an awful lot of various facets that are involved. It's not one single one.
And I imagine there's a harmonic effect when the right person goes in the right circle to have a healing experience.
Well, very possibly. Yes. I mean, there's so much we really don't know. And this is why it is, what is it called? The Science and Power of a Mysterious Intelligence. Yes, there you are. I mean, that says everything.
Yeah. Well, this is so fantastic. Is there anything that we haven't touched on that you think is important for people to
well,
know?
I don't really know. All I can say is that just for them to look at them may be of benefit to them. Many people have suffered really wonderful. There was this physicist who was a great friend of mine. He's just died. An awful lot of people have died because I've been in this phenomenon a long time, which is very sad. I see people dying around me who are older than me. And he was a dowser. And he kept all my calendars year after year, and he'd cut the pictures out and he'd put them in a scrapbook. And understanding the connection between music and geometry and how they can affect you remotely, he had many various ailments like a bad ankle and all that sort of thing. He suddenly decided one day he would dowse some of these formations to see if he could find one which might relate to any of his ailments. And he did. And he said they were really, how it worked was that in the morning, maybe we'll take his ankle, for instance, and he would put his pendulum over the picture, and it would start to spin. And when the session was over, the healing session was over, it would stop. And his ankle felt a huge amount better. Well, all I can tell you was I was just at the time I was chatting to him about this, and I said, David, that's really remarkable. I said, I'm suffering from a migraine, but I said, it's not one of my really nasty ones. It's just one of those insidious ones that has been going on for about 2 weeks, and I simply can't shift it. And he said, well, Lucy, why don't you have a go at dowsing one of your pictures? So all I can tell you was, I've got so many. Anyhow, I went through this one, next one. No. I thought I almost gave up. And then there was one extraordinary one where it went like that. It just went absolutely crazy over it. So I got a bigger picture and I sat in my chair in the sitting room staring at it. And it looked horrible. It was jiggity, jaggedy. And I thought, what am I was starting to feel even worse. I said, what am I doing to myself? And then I thought, no, I've got to stick with this. And suddenly I saw it evolving into all different 3D shapes in front of my eyes. And I thought, oh, this is fascinating. I was so intrigued looking at all these extraordinary things. And then I don't know how long, you lose sense of time, just like I was telling you. My headache had gone. And I keep that around. Now, I was telling somebody about that in one of my talks. And I got all the pictures up for the crop circles that had appeared this year. And she was so fascinated in this. And I said, it may not work for you. This picture may not work for you. And she went up to the board and she went straight into one. She said, that is talking to me. Well, all I can tell you was it said nothing to me whatsoever. So this is where it's so interesting, how it's very, very much an individual thing. And so she bought that particular picture. And I hope it helped her.
Yeah.
But many people have asked me because we know they have healing properties, just as we know they don't. And many people have written to me asking for a crop circle to which they want to hang up a big one, enlarge it, and some prominent place where they can look at it and hopefully meditate on it or whatever they want to do. And I say, well, you have got to go through my library, and it's quite a big library, and you've got to find the one that speaks to you, that actually talks to you. And then if the photograph is good enough, because the ones, the ancient ones, some of them are not quite so sharp. If that happens, I will get one blown up and sent out to you, and then you can hang it and do whatever you want with it. But I can't choose it for you.
Right.
You've got to be the person to choose it.
And did you keep, were you able to go back to the same photo of the crop circle, the one you found for your headache, and use it again?
Well, touch wood, maybe it's cured my migraines permanently. I can't tell you. I've been absolutely fine, but I have it around.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
But other people have used them repeatedly.
Well, I think they have. I mean, but I don't know. But I get many, many reports of how people have benefited.
Okay, well, I'm going to have to find my crop circle. I'm going to have to go through your
look through
and
the thing and find it, and it probably might be it'd be your very personal one, and it might not help anybody else.
Yeah. Okay, that's a fun adventure, a fun challenge that I can do, and anybody listening can
challenge.
I just try it as well.
The light on. I think I've got to go very soon, Derek. We've had a good long chat, and we've covered many different areas, but there are just so many areas in this subject which you can dig and delve and
yeah. So where would you like to point people? Where should they find you?
Where should they find me? On my website, which is wait a second, it's lucipringle.co.uk. Well,
Yes, we'll have links for everyone.
You send out the links.
Yes,
and my calendar should be coming up. My book, I can send you the signed one. And yes, please support me in any way that you really possibly can, because I think this is a subject which is so important. And the work that I'm doing, hopefully, you might feel is important too.
Yeah, and whether it's Parkinson's or your own crop circle for healing, it sounds like there's some really great benefits to be had. So,
fantastic.
Thank you for the work that you're doing and the research and sticking with it. And thanks for coming on the show.
Well, I am sticking with it. Because I'm so passionate about it. And thank you. I've enjoyed it.
Thanks, Lucy.
All right.
Talk soon.
Okay. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.